The Dread Chapel of Thornewood Moor. It has ever been my habit, when confronted with events of singular darkness, to commit them first to memory, and only later, when time has dulled their sharper edges, to set them down in writing. Such has been the case with the matter I now recount, a case so steeped in fog and fear that I hesitated long before unsealing the notes I kept during those harrowing weeks in Sussex. My friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes, with his usual disdain for the supernatural, would no doubt dismiss the tale as one of terrestrial wickedness cloaked in borrowed robes of ritual and superstition. And yet, I cannot wholly shake the sense that, in this instance, we walked not merely into a criminal enterprise, but into the cold shadow of something older, something buried. The affair began, as many do, in our rooms at Baker Street, on an evening thick with November fog. A visitor arrived, soaked, spectral, and trembling with urgency, and brought with him whispers of disappearances, of ancient symbols scrawled upon chapel doors, and of a place the villagers spoke of only in hushed tones, the Dread Chapel of Thornewood Moor. What followed was unlike anything I had witnessed in all my years alongside Holmes. We faced not only danger, but deception of the most insidious kind, evil draped in ecclesiastical silence, masked by centuries of tradition. Beneath the crumbling stones of that forsaken chapel, we found not ghosts, but men who had made fear a language, and mystery a weapon. It is not a tale for the faint-hearted, nor is it one I share lightly. But, as Holmes once said, the veil must be lifted even when what lies beneath is unpleasant to behold. Here, then, is the full account of our investigation into the matter of Thornewood. I set it down not to entertain, but to warn, for while fog may obscure, it also reveals, and there are places in England where the fog is very old indeed. Chapter 1. The Visitor in the Fog. It was in the early days of November, in that most dismal and sunless period which precedes the frost-bound certainty of an English winter, that I found myself once again in residence at 221B Baker Street. The atmosphere within that venerable sitting-room was much as I had remembered it during those busy months of my bachelorhood. Paper-laden tables, the distinct odor of strong tobacco mingled with the sharper tang of chemicals, and the ceaseless hum of activity which invariably accompanied my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes in the midst of his professional affairs. At the time, I had only just returned from a brief sojourn in Bath, where certain familial obligations had drawn me for a fortnight. Holmes had not accompanied me, pleading, quite rightly I think, that he was not made for the sedate society of spa towns and gouty baronets. That evening, a heavy fog had descended upon London. It crept low over the cobbled streets and drifted in sluggish curls past the gas lamps like some mournful spirit, blanketing the city in a murky shroud. The fire in our grate burned merrily, and Holmes was to be found, pipe in hand, slippers on feet, leaning back with eyes half shut and a faint look of amusement playing at the corner of his lips.
"You are unsettled, Watson,"
he said suddenly, opening his eyes and looking directly at me.
"You tapped your fingers precisely 7 times against the armrest, which you do only when you are preoccupied. A telegram, perhaps? Or something more domestic?"
I smiled, shaking my head at his unerring precision. Merely reflecting on the unnatural stillness of the street outside, one expects London to be alive at all hours.
"Ah,"
he murmured.
"but the city breathes differently in the fog. It hides her secrets, dulls her pulse. It is the only time when London becomes meditative."
A sudden knock at the door disrupted the quiet. 3 raps, firm, yet hesitant. Mrs. Hudson appeared a moment later, her expression curious.
"There's a gentleman here to see you, Mr. Holmes,"
she said.
"Drenched through, poor thing. Didn't give a name."
Holmes's eyes gleamed.
"Show him in, Mrs. Hudson, and fetch him a towel, if you please."
Moments later, the door opened to admit a man of striking appearance. Tall, but gaunt to the point of emaciation, his cheeks hollow and complexion pallid. A mop of dark, wet hair clung to his brow, and his greatcoat was soaked through. He carried a wide-brimmed hat in one gloved hand, and his eyes, deep-set and haunted, flitted about the room before resting on Holmes.
"You will forgive my appearance,"
he said, his voice low and somewhat tremulous.
"I come not out of vanity but necessity."
Holmes gestured to the chair opposite him.
Please sit. You are recently returned from a journey, by train, I should think. Your boots are still clotted with clay from the outer counties. Sussex, perhaps?
The man gave a startled look.
"Indeed, from Thornewood, near Ashdown Forest."
Holmes inclined his head as though that settled the matter.
"Allow me to introduce myself,"
Our visitor said, once seated.
"I am Reverend Horace Ellery, vicar of the parish of St. Cuthbert's at Thornewood. I come to you with a matter most grave and perplexing."
Go on,
Holmes said, steepling his fingers.
Watson, if you would.
I took up my notebook and prepared to record the particulars.
"There is a chapel,"
Ellery began.
"some half a mile from our main church. It is old, far older than the village itself, and it has long stood empty. None in the parish recall a time when it was used. For generations, it has simply been avoided."
A forgotten place, I murmured. He nodded.
"It is known colloquially as the Dread Chapel. Foolish superstition, I had always thought. But last fortnight, 2 of my parishioners, a married couple of excellent repute, disappeared without explanation."
Holmes leaned forward slightly.
And what connection has this to the chapel?
Ellery's voice dropped to a whisper.
"Their tracks led to it, Mr. Holmes, into the fog-shrouded woods and to the chapel's very door. There they vanish. No sign of struggle, no evidence of where they went. Only this."
He withdrew from his coat a small object wrapped in oilcloth. Holmes took it, unwrapped it carefully, and revealed a small brass crucifix. It was warped as though scorched by flame, and the surface bore a sticky residue that emitted a faint metallic odor. Holmes sniffed it, frowned, and handed it to me. The scent was unpleasant, chemical, and acrid. I could make nothing of it.
"There have been other things,"
Ellery went on.
"sounds in the night, lights in the forest, and a strange symbol, painted in a substance like blood, found upon the chapel door only 3 nights ago. I have locked it since."
Holmes was now entirely alert.
You believe, Reverend Ellery, that someone or something is using this ancient chapel for nefarious purposes?
"I do not believe in devils, Mr. Holmes,
Ellery said.
but I believe in evil, and there is something wrong in Thornewood."
Holmes stood.
Then we must depart at once. Watson, you shall accompany me.
Of course. The Reverend rose with evident relief.
"You cannot know how heartening this is."
Holmes turned to him.
Do not thank me yet, Reverend. If your fears are justified, we may find ourselves facing a very human, very dangerous adversary.
Outside, the fog thickened still. Chapter 2. The Road to Thornewood. The morning after Reverend Ellery's unexpected visit dawned bleak and grey. Holmes, characteristically unbothered by the cold and damp, was already dressed and reviewing railway timetables by the time I descended to breakfast. A single boiled egg lay untouched on his plate, beside a pot of strong black coffee and a sheaf of papers littered with cryptic jottings.
You will need your revolver, Watson,
he remarked casually, not looking up.
We depart on the 9:40 to Lewis, thence to Thornewood by trap.
Do you anticipate danger? He smiled faintly.
It is never unwise to prepare for it, especially when ancient chapels and blood symbols are involved. I trust you are fit?
I assured him I was, and by 9:30 we were bundled into a hansom cab, clattering through the mist-laden streets of London toward Victoria Station. The city passed us by like a half-remembered dream, its gas lamps glowing dimly in the morning fog, its figures hunched and hurried. Our journey to the countryside proved unremarkable until the train left the suburbs behind and plunged into the South Downs. There, the fog returned with renewed intensity, curling in over the low hills and clinging to the hedgerows like a pall. Holmes sat motionless for most of the trip, eyes closed, hands folded. Only once did he speak.
Watson,
He said suddenly.
you recall the particular scent of that crucifix?
Yes, metallic, with a sharp tang, almost acrid. It reminded me of laboratory solvents.
Precisely. The odor was not blood, as our good reverend may have believed, but potassium dichromate, an oxidizing agent frequently used in photographic development. I suspect the symbol on the chapel door was not daubed in blood at all.
Then a trick, meant to alarm.
Or to obscure. We shall know more soon.
We arrived at Thornewood station shortly before noon. It was little more than a platform of grey stone set amidst bracken and gorse, with a single porter tending a handcart stacked with parcels. Reverend Ellery awaited us with a closed carriage drawn by a pair of black horses, and we soon set off along the rutted lane that wound through the moor. The landscape grew increasingly desolate as we progressed. Trees stood far apart, their branches twisted by years of coastal wind, and patches of heath stretched into the distance like a sea of rust. Ravens croaked overhead. It was a place steeped in melancholy.
Thornewood is not much altered since the Norman conquest.
Ellery said, pulling his coat tight.
The soil is poor, the winters long, and the folk cautious.
I suppose superstition flourishes in such places, I observed.
It does, and it feeds upon itself.
Holmes said nothing, but his eyes never ceased their scrutiny of the landscape. At last we reached the village itself, a meagre clutch of stone cottages gathered round a low churchyard and a weathered inn. The rectory stood a little apart, beneath the shade of two vast yew trees, and it was there that we dismounted.
You shall have the guest rooms,
Ellery said, ushering us inside.
I have made what preparations I can, but I fear you shall find no comfort in the dread chapel.
Holmes raised an eyebrow.
That remains to be seen.
After settling in and taking a light luncheon, cold ham, dark bread, and a rough cider, we departed for the chapel on foot. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing a glimmer of one light, though the air remained thick with damp. We passed through the edge of the village and along a half-forgotten cart path flanked by gnarled oaks. After nearly a quarter hour, the trees parted, and we came upon it, a crumbling edifice of flint and moss-covered stone, hunched upon a low rise amid the heather like some ancient sentinel. The chapel had no steeple, only a squat belfry from which the bell had long since vanished. Its arched windows were blackened, the panes either broken or thick with grime, and ivy clung to its walls like a winding shroud. The door was heavy oak, bound with iron, and barred from without by a recent plank of wood nailed across it. Upon its center, a crude symbol had been scrawled, two concentric circles enclosing a triangle, intersected by a jagged line. The paint had flaked, but enough remained to suggest a vivid crimson hue. Holmes studied it intently.
Not blood,
He murmured.
nor ink, but something devised to resemble both. Let me see.
He produced a small lens from his coat and peered at the symbol for several minutes. Then he scraped a portion of it onto a handkerchief.
Watson,
He said,
remind me to analyze this in London. I suspect it will yield something most enlightening.
"Do you believe this to be the work of villagers, or of an outsider?"
I do not yet know,
he replied.
but I find it improbable that superstition alone would provoke such theatricality. No, there is an intelligence behind this, and a method.
Reverend Ellery watched uneasily.
I fear to unbar the door, Mr. Holmes.
You are right to fear it. But fear, as you must know, is not the province of the rational man.
With a firm hand, Holmes prized the plank loose. The old hinges groaned as he pushed the door open. What greeted us was a darkness more complete than any I had known, a place so devoid of light that it seemed to swallow the day. Holmes struck a match and lit a lantern from his satchel. The glow revealed cracked flagstones, overturned pews, and shattered remnants of an altar. And there, at the far end of the chapel, beneath what had once been a stained glass window, lay a curious structure, a circle of standing stones, scarcely 2 feet high, arranged in a perfect ring. Inside that ring, the dust was undisturbed. Outside it, however, footprints marred the floor, large, deliberate, and unshod. Holmes crouched.
Not recent,
He said.
but not ancient either. And note, Watson, there is no second set. Whoever entered here did not leave the way they came.
I felt a cold chill grip my spine. The stillness pressed in around us like a shroud. Holmes stood slowly.
There is something buried here. I would stake my reputation on it.
He turned to Ellery.
You mentioned a graveyard?
Yes,
The vicar said hoarsely.
but it lies to the north. This place was never consecrated.
Holmes's eyes gleamed.
Then we must ask, what was it used for?
Chapter 3. The Whispering Stones. We left the chapel in a subdued silence, the cold air biting more sharply than before, though whether it was the weather or some deeper foreboding, I could not say. Holmes walked briskly ahead, his long coat flaring like a raven's wing in the wind, his lantern still aglow. The Reverend Ellery and I followed behind, careful not to disturb the faint traces left upon the chapel floor. Upon reaching the path again, Holmes paused.
We must return by night.
He said quietly, half to himself.
There is more to observe, more that cannot be seen by the sober light of day.
Ellery looked troubled.
You intend to keep watch at the chapel?
I do, tonight.
The vicar glanced toward the woods.
Then I shall pray for you, Mr. Holmes, and keep my doors unlocked should you require sanctuary.
Holmes gave him a dry smile.
Your charity is noted, Reverend.
We returned to the rectory, where Mrs. Fawcett, the vicar's housekeeper, served a plain but satisfying supper of stewed lamb and root vegetables. Holmes ate sparingly, eyes distant, fingers drumming upon the table in unconscious rhythm. I knew the signs well. He was deep in calculation, fitting some unseen puzzle together in the recesses of that remarkable mind. After the meal, we retired to a small parlor lined with books. A fire crackled in the grate, but Holmes declined its comfort. Instead, he laid the sample of painted symbol upon a plate and examined it with his pocket microscope.
Just as I suspected.
He said at last, holding it up.
Chromate pigment in a linseed medium, very crude and hastily mixed. No artist's hand. But the triangle inside the double circle, it is not mere invention.
An occult symbol? I asked. He looked at me sidelong.
An appropriated one, borrowed likely from a volume of esoteric nonsense. But the man who drew it knew what effect it would have on uneducated eyes. This is no cultist, Watson. This is a man of means, cunning, and theatre.
At 10:30, we made ready. Holmes packed his satchel with essentials, lantern, notebook, revolver, and several items whose purpose he did not disclose. I carried my own revolver, though I admit to checking its load more than once. By 11, we were again at the chapel. The fog had returned in force. It lapped at the low walls like sea foam and muted every sound, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the grass. The night pressed upon us with uncanny weight, and even Holmes moved with a deliberate caution I had rarely seen in him. We entered the chapel and closed the door behind us. The lantern's glow painted the ruins in amber and shadow. Holmes examined the stone ring once more, then set down his pack.
We shall remain here until morning,
he said.
but not idly. Watson, help me set this.
He produced a fine black thread and tied it across the threshold of the chapel, waist high, anchoring it to nails driven lightly into the wood. Then he withdrew a small vial and sprinkled a fine powder across the stone ring. Another string of bells, miniature ones, silent now, was suspended between two pillars near the chancel arch. "Trip lines," I said. "But to what end?"
Observation, not entrapment. I wish to learn who comes and how.
So we waited. The hours passed slowly, and the chill crept deeper. Holmes sat cross-legged, motionless, his eyes fixed upon the altar. I watched the doors. The fog swirled through the broken windows, and twice I thought I heard whispering, soft, indeterminate. But when I turned, Holmes only shook his head.
Not real,
he said.
The mind creates noise when deprived of stimulus. Stay alert.
Shortly after 3 o'clock, something changed. It was not a sound at first, nor a movement, but a pressure, as though the very air had thickened. Holmes rose in a fluid motion and extinguished the lantern. We were plunged into blackness.
"Do not speak,"
he breathed. Then it came. A faint creak of the chapel door, a soft scrape against stone, a rustle like cloth dragged across the floor. My hand went to my revolver. The air grew colder, shapes moved in the darkness, suggested more than seen. Something stepped over the trip line without disturbing it. Holmes exhaled.
Clever.
There was a sudden flare of light, a magnesium flash from Holmes's lantern, and the chapel was illuminated in a ghostly white. In that instant, I saw it. A figure, tall and cloaked, standing just within the stone ring, its face obscured by a bird-like mask of some dark material. Holmes cried out,
"Watson, to the ring!"
But the figure was gone. The light died. All that remained was the echo of our breathing. We relit the lantern and scoured the chapel. The powder around the stone ring was undisturbed. The bells had not rung. No footprints, no sign of entry or exit. Holmes crouched again, studying the space inside the ring. He touched the stone gently, then turned to me.
"It is not a place of summoning,"
he said.
"It is a place of concealment."
We stayed until dawn. Nothing further came. Chapter 4. The Moorland Disappearances. Dawn arrived as a pale suggestion rather than an event. Grey light filtered through the shattered windows of the dread chapel, casting long shadows that only deepened the desolation within. Holmes and I emerged from the ruin haggard but uninjured, our senses sharpened by the spectral visitation, or its calculated imitation, of the previous night. The Reverend awaited us at the rectory, bleary-eyed but anxious. We relayed what we had seen, though Holmes was careful in his phrasing.
An intruder rather than an apparition. Disguised, aware of our presence, and exceedingly careful not to be caught.
Then it is not the devil's work?
The vicar asked, scarcely masking his relief. Holmes gave a rare, wry smile.
No, Reverend. This mischief is earthly, though wrapped in robes of superstition, but its aim is more dangerous than mere fright.
After a meagre breakfast, porridge and boiled eggs, Holmes requested to examine the parish records.
"I am seeking two things,"
he said.
"First, any past accounts of disappearances, dating back as far as your archives allow. Second, records of land ownership, particularly that which borders the chapel."
Reverend Ellery led us into a narrow back room where wooden cabinets lined the walls. Together, we pored over dusty ledgers and yellowing correspondence, while Holmes leafed rapidly through property maps and notary reports. "Here," I said at last, tapping a page. 1861. Edward Dawlish and Margaret Dawlish, brother and sister, went missing on the moor. No bodies recovered.
Again in 1875,
Holmes added, placing a second ledger beside it.
And in 1883, all pairs, always a man and a woman, no pattern in age or relation.
"Do you believe them murdered?" I asked.
Not conclusively,
he replied.
But their disappearance is no accident. If the past is prologue, we may expect another attempt soon.
We returned to the village that afternoon. Holmes interviewed several residents with characteristic discretion: tradesmen, the blacksmith, and the widow who kept the grocer's shop. Most were tight-lipped or evasive when the chapel was mentioned. One elderly woman, a Mrs. Brierly, offered a whispered confession over her jars of chutney.
They come in the fog,
She said, eyes darting.
they always have, wearing masks like beasts, once every few years, always two taken, never seen again.
And the villagers do nothing?
Holmes asked gently.
What can we do?
She hissed.
They're devils, or worse, gentlemen with devil's money, men who own land and rights and silence.
Holmes nodded gravely and left her with a coin for her trouble. As we departed, he turned to me.
That,
He said.
is the first honest thing anyone here has said.
We made our way to the moor's edge, where the ground turned boggy and the scrub grew sparse. Here, Holmes paused and crouched. He withdrew his glass and examined the soil.
See here, Watson. Fresh cart tracks. 2 sets. Narrow gauge, perhaps from a trap or light wagon.
Coming from the east, I observed, toward the wood.
Precisely, and recent. Within the last day.
He stood and motioned for us to follow. We traced the tracks through the moor for some distance until they vanished into a gully where the ground grew too rocky to hold an imprint.
There is a second route to the chapel,
Holmes murmured.
unknown to the villagers, used under cover of fog.
He took out his notebook and made a swift sketch. We returned to the rectory at dusk. Holmes was uncharacteristically silent through supper. As I stoked the fire that evening, he stood by the window, staring out across the darkened moor.
Watson,
He said at last.
have you ever considered the uses of fear?
Frequently, I replied, most often in your company. He smiled faintly.
It is a tool like any other. In the right hands, it can move entire communities, drive families from land, seal mouths tighter than coin. But in this case, it may also be a veil, one meant to conceal a deeply rational evil behind an irrational mask.
He turned to me.
We are not merely chasing a criminal, Watson. We are excavating a tradition, ritualized, systematized, and hidden in plain sight.
I felt a cold unease settle over me. You believe there is a pattern to the disappearances?
Without question, and I believe the next is soon due.
That night, as I prepared for bed, Holmes was already dressing again. You are going out?
Only briefly, I wish to examine the southern edge of the moor, alone, if you'll permit me.
Holmes, surely that's unwise.
I shall carry my revolver and be back within the hour.
He paused at the door.
Watson, lock the window. And if I am not back by dawn...
But he left the rest unsaid. He was gone before I could protest. Chapter 5. The Man in the Mask. It was not in my nature to disobey Holmes's instructions, yet sleep eluded me that night, and my thoughts raced with grim possibilities. By the hour of 1, I found myself seated by the window, watching the moor through the thick pane, every shadow a threat, every stirring fog bank a veil concealing doom. Holmes had been gone for 3 hours. I lit a candle and considered dressing to go after him when, suddenly, I heard it, the faint creak of the rectory's side door. I sprang to my feet and reached for my revolver. The door eased open, and in stepped Holmes, his coat damp and face smudged with earth. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes shone with that peculiar fire I knew all too well, the fire of discovery. "You found something," I said.
I've found someone.
He replied, brushing past me and removing his coat.
Or rather, something someone left behind.
He opened his satchel and drew out an object wrapped in a black cloth. Laying it upon the parlor table, he unveiled it with the flair of a stage magician. It was a mask, a grotesque affair fashioned of darkened leather and shaped into the visage of a bird of prey. Hooked beak, exaggerated brow, and small glass lenses where the eyes should be. I shuddered involuntarily. Holmes spoke in a low voice.
This was hidden beneath a cairn of stones at the edge of the gully we visited earlier. It is not old, nor ceremonial. It was made recently. The stitching is machine-tight, the leather tanned in London.
A disguise, then?
Indeed, and a potent one. Its form invokes plague doctor imagery, medieval dread, a brilliant stroke if one's aim is fear or manipulation.
He folded it carefully.
There is more. I followed a path beyond the gully, an old smuggler's route by the look of it, and discovered a hut, locked. But there were recent signs of habitation, a kettle, burnt coals, and this.
He produced a second object, an ivory-handled scalpel, smeared at the tip with what I prayed was rust.
It was driven into the doorframe, as if left deliberately.
I stared. A warning?
A signature.
The remainder of the night passed in uneasy silence. Holmes sat awake by the hearth, reviewing his notes and referring frequently to the maps he had copied from the parish archives. At dawn, he turned to me.
We shall visit the chapel one more time, but not before paying a call on our neighbors.
Which neighbors? He smiled grimly.
The ones no one speaks of.
It was nearly noon when Holmes and I arrived at the gates of Moorcroft House, a dilapidated manor that lay hidden among the trees east of the village. Though the grounds were overgrown, the house itself remained intact, windowed, shuttered, and with smoke curling faintly from one chimney.
This estate,
Holmes explained,
belongs to one Rupert Colney, a man of considerable wealth, though one who has made every effort to remain invisible. He inherited Moorcroft 20 years ago and has lived here intermittently ever since.
What makes you suspect him?
Because, Watson, the chapel stands upon land which abuts his property, and because, according to village accounts, it was his grandfather who first forbade the villagers to approach it.
We were admitted by a silent manservant who led us to a study panelled in dark oak. There, by a roaring fire, sat Colney himself, a pale, elegant man of about 50, dressed in a black velvet smoking jacket, his eyes sunken but intelligent.
Mr. Holmes,
he said without rising,
your reputation precedes you.
And yours precedes you, Mr. Colney,
Holmes replied, settling into a chair uninvited. Colney offered a thin smile.
To what do I owe the pleasure?
Holmes leaned forward.
To an old chapel, a string of disappearances, and a mask I suspect once belonged to a member of your household.
Colney's face did not change.
You make bold claims.
And you have kept remarkably silent while the MOOR devours its people.
I am not a constable, Mr. Holmes.
Number. But you are the inheritor of a private estate upon which men and women vanish, and over which the people of Thornewood dare not speak.
There was a long pause. Then Colney rose and walked to the window.
My grandfather was not a kind man. He believed in the power of terror. He used the chapel as a means of control, secret gatherings, masks, symbols, even sacrifices, some say.
He turned back.
I have not continued those practices.
But you have allowed them to continue,
Holmes said softly.
I have not stopped them,
Colney replied. Holmes stood.
Then I must ask you plainly, who now leads them?
Colney's gaze hardened.
That I do not know. The masks returned 5 years ago, not by my hand, but once loosed, such traditions are hard to cage again.
Holmes studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded.
Thank you. That will suffice, for now.
As we walked back toward the village, I turned to Holmes. You believed him?
Only partially, but his information confirms what I already suspected.
Which is?
That this is no single murderer, Watson. This is a society.
Chapter 6. The Circle Beneath the Chapel. The following day dawned beneath a sullen sky, the kind of low grey ceiling that seems to press the moorland downward into the earth. Holmes paced restlessly by the hearth, consulting both his watch and his notes with increasing frequency. At precisely 1 o'clock he snapped his notebook shut and reached for his coat.
To the chapel,
he said,
and this time with tools.
Reverend Ellery met us at the path, accompanied by 2 strong-handed farm lads whom Holmes had discreetly requested through the vicar's intercession. Each bore a spade and a lantern. Holmes handed me a folded oilskin map and led the way across the sodden path through the moor. The sky threatened rain, but held its fury in check, for now. As we approached the chapel, a murder of crows lifted from the broken walls and scattered into the fog, as though disturbed in their vigil. Holmes paused at the door, tested the latch, and nodded to the young men.
Carefully,
he said.
We dig within the stone circle, only there.
Inside, the air was sour and cold. I felt again the subtle unease that had haunted us during our night watch, though in the light of day, the shadows seemed thinner, less oppressive. Holmes directed the young men to the precise center of the circle and oversaw the first few strokes of the spade. Within minutes, the tools struck something solid.
Wood,
one of the lads said, his voice hushed. Holmes knelt. With gloved hands, he cleared the dirt and revealed the edge of a square panel, roughly 4 feet across, fitted with iron hinges and a brass ring. A trapdoor.
No inscription,
Holmes murmured.
And the brass is polished, used recently.
He looked at me.
Your revolver, Watson.
I nodded, cocked it, and stood at the ready. Holmes grasped the ring and heaved. The door came up with a groan, revealing a narrow staircase descending into blackness. A rank, earthy smell rose from below, mold, rotting wood, and something else more elusive. Not decay precisely, but damp secrecy. Holmes lit a second lantern, handed one to me, and gestured to the men.
You 2 remain here. No one enters or exits unless I return.
They nodded solemnly. Together, Holmes and I descended into the dark. The stairs led down into a narrow corridor cut from the living earth, its walls shored with old beams and stones that dripped with moisture. The passage twisted and turned, descending gradually for some 20 yards before opening into a low chamber. The light from our lanterns revealed stone pillars and arched vaulting, far older than the chapel above. The air here was still, heavy with silence. And at the far end of the chamber, a second circle awaited us. This one was wrought in carved stone, elaborate symbols etched into the floor, intersected with iron studs that gleamed faintly in the light. It was a mirror of the ring above, but larger. In its center stood a pedestal. Upon it rested a ledger bound in black leather. Holmes approached with great care. He examined the surrounding floor and nodded.
No tripwires, no obvious traps.
He opened the ledger. Inside were names, hundreds of them, dates, notes, codes in ciphered Latin, a record, cold and bureaucratic, of ceremonies, rituals, and selections. Holmes's face grew hard.
This,
he said,
is a register of sacrifices.
I felt my stomach turn.
Look here,
he continued.
Each disappearance, paired names, dates corresponding to those we uncovered. These entries reach back decades, and the most recent...
He pointed to a line, fresh in ink.
Just 3 weeks ago, Margaret and Jonathan Reeve, the couple Ellery mentioned.
He turned a page. Another entry awaited.
Candidates for next passage, L. Abberton and M. Ellery.
I stared. Ellery, the vicar's niece. Holmes nodded grimly.
They are selecting from the village by bloodline, likely those of mixed inheritance, new and old families. Easier to silence, easier to erase.
Suddenly, a sound reached us. Footsteps, not behind us, but ahead, within the chamber. Holmes extinguished his lantern. I followed suit. In the faintest glow from above, we saw a figure emerge from the far wall through a hidden aperture, cloaked, masked. A second figure followed, then a third. Holmes grabbed my arm.
Back, quietly.
We retreated up the stair, closing the trapdoor without a sound. Above, the farmlads had drawn back in fear at the sight of our pale faces.
We are not alone down there,
Holmes said. Then, with calm authority, he barred the chapel door behind us. That evening, back at the rectory, Holmes drafted a telegram to Inspector Lestrade.
Urgent. Proceed at once to Thornewood Moor with 4 men. Chapel conceals criminal society. Hostile. Advise covert entry. S.H.
He sealed the ledger within his satchel and turned to me.
This is no longer a puzzle, Watson. It is a conspiracy, and tomorrow we crack it open.
Chapter 7. The Society of the Veil. The morning brought with it a downpour, the kind that seems to leach the color from the world, rendering sky, soil and soul equally grey. The village of Thornewood was all but abandoned to the storm. Doors remained bolted, windows shuttered. The inn's sign creaked on its rusting chain, and not a soul stirred in the lanes. Holmes, however, was in high spirits.
Today, Watson,
he said, pouring himself a third cup of black tea.
we meet the architects of this little nightmare. Lestrade will arrive within the hour. I expect he'll be armed with warrants and 3 constables from the yard's rural division.
What do you mean to do? He smiled tightly.
We knock on the serpent's door.
At 9:30, a hired trap delivered Inspector Lestrade to the rectory. He wore his habitual expression of polite skepticism.
Well, Holmes,
He said,
your telegram was a masterpiece of drama. You'd think I were being summoned to unravel the black mass of Piccadilly.
You are.
Holmes replied.
Only here it's cloaked in older garments and very real consequences.
Lestrade raised an eyebrow.
Is it murder you suspect, or something darker?
Both,
Said Holmes.
but not murder for rage or gain. Murder as ritual, disappearance as design.
He produced the ledger and placed it on the table. Lestrade flipped through it, his expression darkening with each page.
My word,
He muttered.
this is an index of executions.
Holmes nodded.
Disguised in religious and pagan nomenclature, but that's the crux of it. Generations of carefully hidden abductions, all covered by the moor's fog and the villagers' fear.
And you have suspects?
I have participants,
Holmes replied.
but we must force their hand. Tonight, they will gather again. I propose we attend.
Lestrade nodded slowly.
Then we'd best be armed.
That night, beneath a moon veiled by scudding clouds, we returned to the dread chapel. Holmes, Lestrade and I were dressed in dark coats, each of us armed and carrying lanterns with hoods drawn low. The 3 constables took positions surrounding the chapel, prepared to intervene on signal. Inside, the trap door yawned open. Holmes went first, then I, then Lestrade, and we descended once more into the subterranean corridor. But now, all was changed. Where once had been silence and dust, now there were torches set in sconces, casting leaping shadows upon the stone walls. The chamber at the end glowed with dull light. From within came the murmur of voices, dozens of them, low and resonant. We crept forward until we could see. The chamber was full. Men in long robes and grotesque masks stood in a great ring around the carved stone circle. At its center knelt 2 figures, hooded, bound. A third figure stepped forward from the crowd, his mask fashioned like a stag's head, antlers curling toward the vaulted ceiling. Holmes whispered,
That is the High Ordainer. The same title appears again and again in the ledger.
A chant began, low, rhythmic, in some bastard Latin. The High Ordainer raised a knife of ancient pattern, flint or bone, curved like a sickle. Holmes acted. He stepped forward into the light, revolver drawn.
"In the name of Scotland Yard,"
he shouted.
"lay down your weapon!"
Pandemonium erupted. Lestrade sprang into the chamber, his own weapon drawn. Constables followed through hidden entrances Holmes had discovered earlier. Several of the masked men attempted to flee through the narrow tunnel, but the yard was ready. The High Ordainer did not move. He stared through the holes in his mask at Holmes.
"You cannot stop us,"
he said softly.
"We are older than your queen, older than your science."
Holmes replied with iron calm.
"Then consider this the dawn of a very rude awakening."
The Ordainer lunged forward, but Holmes was faster. He fired once, striking the man in the shoulder. He fell with a cry, the flint knife clattering from his hand. The bound figures were quickly freed. One was Miss Mary Ellery, the vicar's niece. The other, a stable boy named Lewis Aberton, who trembled violently but was otherwise unharmed. The constables rounded up the rest of the masked congregation. As the masks were pulled away, I recognized faces I had passed in the village. Shopkeepers, landholders, even the schoolmaster. Each wore the same expression, blank resignation, as if the unveiling had at last lifted a burden. Lestrade shook his head.
"Never in my life."
Holmes replaced his revolver.
"Fear, Inspector, is an inheritance, but so is justice."
By dawn, the chapel was sealed. The ring beneath it was marked and measured. The ledger, safely in Lestrade's possession, was to be used as evidence in London's highest courts. Miss Ellery was reunited with her uncle, whose gratitude exceeded all words. Holmes deflected it with typical brevity.
"I detest ceremonies, Reverend,"
he said.
"but I am fond of conclusions."
As the yard took the prisoners away, Holmes and I watched from the edge of the moor. The fog had lifted at last. The sun shone on the yew trees, the stones, and the ancient wood. "Do you believe it's over?" I asked.
"For now,"
Holmes said.
"but superstition is like ivy. Cut it down, and it returns unless you uproot it.
He turned to me.
But we have the names, the records, and the truth. That, my dear Watson, is the sharpest knife."
Chapter 8. Echoes of the Chapel. In the week following the events beneath the chapel, Thornewood became a village suspended between silence and scandal. Word spread quickly, though not through official channels. The villagers, long cowed by superstition and generational dread, began at last to speak. Cautiously, yes, but with voices unburdened by secrecy. The High Ordainer, once unmasked, was revealed to be one Gerald Harper, the village solicitor, and by all appearances, an unassuming man in his late 50s. He had lived quietly for decades, rarely seen outside his book-lined study. His confessions to Lestrade were sparse but chilling.
"I did not begin it,"
he told the inspector.
"but I was chosen, as others were before me."
Holmes, of course, had little patience for mystical inheritance.
"Chosen is often the final refuge of men who wish to evade responsibility,"
he said.
"But the ledgers, the masks, the architecture of this cult, it all required deliberate effort, funding, coordination."
We remained in Thornewood for several days at Lestrade's request to assist in sorting the enormity of the society's implications. Each day, new pieces surfaced. A cache of documents beneath Harper's home detailed financial records, coded letters, and foreign correspondence reaching as far as Bavaria and the Carpathian regions, suggesting the society was not an isolated affair, but part of a broader, more ancient network.
"This was a node,"
Holmes said as we sat again in the rectory parlor.
"not the origin."
"Then others exist?"
"Undoubtedly, but this one is finished."
We were visited that afternoon by Miss Mary Ellery, accompanied by her uncle. She had recovered well from the ordeal. though her eyes retained a haunted look.
I wanted to thank you, Mr. Holmes.
She said.
And you, Dr. Watson. I believe I would not be here if not for you both.
Holmes bowed slightly.
It is enough that you are safe.
She hesitated.
Do you believe it is truly over?
Holmes gave a small smile.
No secret is eternal, Miss Ellery. But sunlight, inquiry, and the law are capable of erasing even the oldest shadows.
When she had left, Holmes turned to me.
It is an odd thing, Watson. We think of evil as loud, brutal, unthinking. But more often it is subtle. It wears spectacles, it files papers, it keeps accounts.
And in this case, I said, it wore masks. He nodded.
Masks hide not only faces but responsibilities.
That night, on our final evening in Thornewood, we returned once more to the dread chapel, not in pursuit, but in reflection. The building stood silent under the rising moon. The trap-door had been sealed with brick, the altar removed. It was now, at last, an empty ruin. We sat for a time among the pews, saying little. Holmes smoked, his face unreadable. Finally, he said,
We often speak of crimes as puzzles, as problems to be solved.
He turned to me.
But this, Watson, was not a problem. It was a wound, long ignored, and we did not solve it. We cut it open. Whether it heals, that is no longer our task.
We left the chapel, and this time it did not follow us. Chapter 9. A Letter from Bavaria. It was a fortnight after our return to Baker Street that the first foreign tremor reached us. The damp fogs of London had resumed their habitual grip on the city, and Holmes had fallen into one of his less industrious moods, a period I privately associated with mental fermentation. He played the violin at odd hours, sometimes with great beauty, sometimes in excruciating dissonance, and he smoked far more than was good for either of us. It was during one such morning, when he had only just concluded a tortured improvisation in the Hungarian style, that Mrs. Hudson entered with the day's post.
There's one from abroad, Mr. Holmes,
she said, her brow slightly creased.
No return address. Hand-delivered to the door not 2 hours ago.
Holmes opened it immediately. The letter, inscribed in an angular Germanic hand, was written in English of formal and unsettling precision.
Herr Sherlock Holmes, we are aware of your interference at Thornewood and regret the necessity of correspondence. What you uncovered was not the work of madmen, nor criminals in the conventional sense, but of initiates upholding a sacred continuum. The Society of the Veil does not exist in one place, nor in one time. You have removed a tooth from the beast, but not the mind that guides it. Be warned. Further disruption will draw the eye of the inner circle. Some truths are not meant to be dissected. Some veils are drawn to protect not the hidden, but the seer. We advise silence. In aeternum, the custodian.
Holmes read the letter twice, then handed it to me without a word. What do you make of it? I asked. He sat back in his armchair and steepled his fingers.
A threat, carefully couched. But more than that, a declaration.
He rose and paced.
We had evidence of foreign ties from the ledgers in Thornewood, but this is more personal. They know me. Likely they've observed my methods, perhaps even my habits.
I felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. Do you believe this inner circle is real?
Oh, I have no doubt,
Holmes said.
Secret societies thrive on hierarchy. The more arcane the knowledge, the greater the reverence for those who hold it.
And what of their claim, that we've only removed a tooth? He gave a dry chuckle.
Let them bare their gums and snarl. We've shaken them, Watson. That is no small thing.
He returned to the letter.
The phrasing is curious. Some veils are drawn to protect not the hidden, but the seer. That is not a warning. That is a superstition masquerading as philosophy.
I said. It sounds like doctrine.
Exactly.
He turned sharply.
And doctrine, my dear Watson, can be cracked.
Later that evening, we met with Inspector Lestrade in a quiet corner of the Reform Club. The letter had been duplicated and sent to the yard under sealed cover.
I've sent word to the Foreign Office,
Lestrade said, stirring his tea.
If there's a broader network, it may touch upon continental cases, unexplained disappearances in remote provinces, closed investigations, sealed archives. We've overlooked much by mistaking superstition for madness.
Holmes nodded.
And by mistaking tradition for innocence.
Lestrade glanced up.
You're not finished with this, are you?
Holmes allowed himself a small smile.
When am I ever, Inspector?
The next day, I found Holmes examining a series of old maps, some of England, others of Europe. A folder of sketches from Thornewood lay open beside him. The stone rings, the chapel's foundation, the subterranean vault.
There is a pattern,
he said. To the societies.
To their architecture. The rings, the alignment of the chapels, the recurring triangle within circles motif. It suggests ritual geography. I suspect the society builds atop ley lines or whatever passes for sacred geometry in their creed. Mere superstition, of course, but they believe it. That belief shapes their actions.
He turned to me.
The real question is, how far does this circle extend?
That evening, we received a second letter. This one bore no seal, only a pressed sprig of yew bound in wax. There was no text, only the yew. Holmes held it up to the firelight, expression unreadable.
Well, Watson,
he said at last.
We may have severed the limb, but the root runs deep.
Chapter 10. The Veil Lifted. The final days of November descended upon London with a grim elegance, fog, frost, and the slow toll of a city settling into winter. At 221B Baker Street the hearth burned brightly, but neither the warmth of the fire nor Mrs. Hudson's excellent currant scones could thaw the sense of quiet unease that lingered since the arrival of the second letter. Holmes had returned to his routines, at least outwardly. He rose early, dressed immaculately, and perused the agony columns for curiosities. Yet I noted subtle changes, longer periods of silence, a meticulous preoccupation with the mail, and, most telling of all, a growing list of inquiries sent abroad via coded wire. One morning, as I entered with the post, Holmes stood at the window, a steaming cup of coffee untouched beside him.
More letters?
He asked without turning. Only one, I said, holding it out. France, Parisian postmark. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet. Upon it, an address, handwritten in a slanting, educated script. Rue de l'Énigme, numéro 12, Montmartre, beneath the red violin. Holmes studied it with interest.
The red violin,
he mused.
A cabaret frequented by poets, revolutionaries, and, if rumor is to be believed, esoteric cartographers.
I could not help smiling. We're to take our investigation to Paris? He looked at me with a glint of the old fire.
I am uncertain, but they've extended an invitation, and it would be impolite to decline.
Before departing, Holmes took one final trip to Thornewood. I accompanied him, and though the village had returned to a semblance of quiet life, we found signs that the events had not entirely faded. The chapel remained sealed, but the moor bore fresh tracks, bootprints near the old cairn where the mask had been buried, and a set of cartwheels leading to the tree line and vanishing into marsh.
Someone's come looking,
Holmes said.
Or clearing.
Reverend Ellery greeted us solemnly at the rectory.
We've been rebuilding,
he said.
but the people still do not walk near the ruins.
Holmes nodded.
Perhaps in time, but fear is slower to depart than fog.
We visited the chapel one final time. Its stone ring now lay broken, the door barred and chained. As we stood in the lengthening shadows, Holmes traced a finger over the mossy stones and spoke quietly.
There is a justice more ancient than law, Watson. Not mystical, not divine, simply human. It is the justice of truth revealed, light in the cracks.
He paused.
This place is no longer sacred, but it is known.
We returned to London by the evening train. That night, Holmes packed lightly, only a single valise, his violin, and the encrypted cipher book he used when traveling abroad. I watched as he tightened the straps and adjusted the weight, knowing this was not a holiday. As he turned to me, I asked the inevitable, "Shall I come with you?" He gave a small smile.
No, Watson. This is a thread I must follow alone.
I don't like it.
Nor do I. But the shadow that lies across the moors now stretches into Europe. I must see where it leads.
I walked him to the carriage. The fog had returned, coiling in the lamplight. Holmes paused at the threshold.
If I do not return within a month, publish your account. Let the world see what lies beneath the skin of civilization.
I gripped his hand. You'll return. He nodded once. Then, with a flourish of coat and hat, Sherlock Holmes disappeared into the mist. Epilogue, written by Dr. John H. Watson. A month has passed. No word. I have received reports, none confirmed, of a tall Englishman in Vienna, a violinist in Prague, a fire in a hidden library in Strasbourg, but none bore his name. I keep the ledger locked in my drawer. I read the final entry often. Those who hide behind the veil fear not discovery. They fear illumination. May this light endure. S.H. I do not know if Holmes will return, but I know he walks in shadow for all our sakes, and I know this, the veil is lifting.